insane series clinching win.
Thank you very much, Riv. We're just waiting for Sharks to set up for the interview on stage. And while that's happening, I want to go back all the way to the beginning of this. Another game that picks and bans was extremely interesting in this one.
Yeah.
You had some thoughts on this, Freak?
Yeah, so I know we talked about this right at the end of the last game about what kind of bans would change, what picks would come through. And the more I think about it, the more this is sort of exactly what Royal should have done. So they dropped the Shen ban because their blue said they can take first pick, and they dropped away the Aatrox. Okay, that's standard stuff. But then for Fnatic, they made an interesting choice because here are now the chance for two champions to slip through. The Orianna that both teams are contesting, and the Shen that both teams seem to be contesting. And they decide to just ban Orianna and give away Shen, because then you look at the next two picks here for Fnatic, and it's like, well, okay, they banned Orianna, so Fizz gets unlocked. But then instead of getting another high priority pick on red side, they're like, well, we'll grab Varus and wait. And I thought that was kind of an interesting choice because, you know, maybe they leave Orianna and Fizz open to get both of them, or they leave, you know, Shen and Orianna open, and then they can get like two of the three, sort of, right? They can get sort of more into their lineup. So I feel like that was a small falter there for Fnatic. But then the other thing that was interesting from them is that even though they had the entire time to pick their top laner for a counter pick, they waited till the very end to say, actually, it's going to be Rumble. Because Rumble heavily shapes what a team does, and that removed any of the options for Royal to counter pick a Rumble-centric team composition.
And to go into that, Jat was touching on this in the game, but I mean, that Rumble was not used to control Dragon in the way that it probably should have been in the mid-game. And in a way, they spent a lot of those equalizers in the mid-game on trying to create picks instead of trying to zone out Dragon fights. And I think that if they hadn't done that, Fnatic probably could have taken a win in this game.
Well, we're going to come back to this and chat a little bit more about how Royal closed out the series. I believe that, sorry to cut you off, we're going to... I do want to talk about Cyanide in particular from Fnatic because he was their shining light in the series. It really felt like he stepped up his game.
I really feel like the way Cyanide played, he really understood all the champions he was playing. He did really well on Aatrox, actually drew attention to Aatrox, and then got his Jarvan back, which he plays so well. Whenever Cyanide knows he's going to die, he'll just go back into the fight, combo people, stun them. His Cataclysm, I still remember Cataclysm in the middle of the fight where he gets two people in there, kill one, flashes out. At the same time, Uzi is zoned by the Cataclysm upwards into Fnatic's team. He's been so vital in their team fights, and his kill participation was so high as well.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay, sure, I'll do it. And I think, yeah, by looking at how well Cyanide had been playing, like, for Royal, I'm glad that they had banned Aatrox because Cyanide was carrying a lot of fights. He was killing one or two people by himself at multiple points during that game 3. And you lower his damage output a little bit, you give him Jarvan, who's got different strengths, but not I'm going to kill you strengths. And that actually, I think, helped Royal Club a lot throughout that game.
There was a pretty big butt, though. And I think Double is going to expand on this one.
Well, I just wanted to point out more that the biggest thing about Fnatic that I saw in these series is not only did they not run TP, which they're known for, and they're really good at, but Peke stepped down where Cyanide played really well. I felt like Peke was really underwhelming this entire series. He lost lane to White consistently, and I felt like he was a little over-aggressive, kind of dove into team fights recklessly, and would die for free a lot.
Yeah, not only that, but I didn't feel like his rotations in the mid-game were particularly effective. And in some ways, I mean, I'm touching on this again, but those Dragon fights, those Dragons could have really, really changed the game for Fnatic. Mm-hmm. They had a lot of options in order to go for those Dragons, but instead they kept going for the picks. They would go all in with their ultimates on the picks, and they knew when the Dragon was coming up. They knew that it would be a problem for them.
There was a problem all series long as well.
Yeah. I think that their timers and their anticipation was a bit off. And unfortunately, in such a very close game, that was probably the difference between victory and defeat.
I agree with Mondi here. I don't know what happened, but maybe some stress got into his head because at one point we see Royal go for a Dragon, Peke moving his Fizz up towards the top lane. There's a possibility of diving Shen with Rumble. Fizz Rumble should be able to dive a full HP Shen there. Halfway, he turns around, goes back to mid, then goes back to the left side of the map, essentially getting zoned out again, which basically forces him out of the lane for free, and yeah, just hesitant.
Yeah, it's worth noting there too that at that point I believe Royal was about 1,000 gold down, and by the time they were finished with this sequence of events, because Fnatic didn't take top turret, it resulted in a mid turret being taken as well in favor of Royal, and they ended up being up 3,000 gold after that. So it was a pretty really huge swing.
Well, one of the things we have to give props to Royal for, they finished the series 3-1. The game they lost is arguably because they're so good at what I'm about to say, Fnatic was able to make it work against them. And Royal were just unforgiving in their aggression. They've seen an opportunity. They took see hero, kill hero to a whole new level. And Fnatic were able to at least anticipate that somewhat in game 3 and allowed them to pick up kills and almost go throughout the game without giving anything up. What was your thought on Royals, diving and teamfight and kill, kill, kill sort of mentality?
I see a lot of it come from Tabe. And well, first thing I want to say is I love you, Tabe. And the second thing is Tabe, even though he died a lot and got caught significantly, like throughout the game, he would just consistently die. He died once every like 5 minutes in this last game. But he's a clutch player. When he flashed Tibert over the wall near Wraiths and caught Cyanide, that's when the game turned around. That's when Royal won a team fight and they got an inhibitor and eventually snowballed it into a Baron. That's because they have clutch players like Tabe who are willing to make those plays, play aggressively, be reckless, and that will eventually result in you getting like a big play like that.
Also at the end, like Tabe bases comes back with over 5 pink wards. Didn't see the number. It was 2 slots filled with pink wards. Like Tabe is just such a vision-centric player. He sacrifices himself entirely for his team.
You can't flash Tibbers without them.
Yeah, and actually that was sort of the thing with Royals playstyles. You talked about how aggressive they were, and we talked about how many dragons and turrets and whatnot they got. That it was interesting. It was actually sort of not what I expected exactly from how these teams matched up, where Royals pushes almost always were in order to get a turret or to get a dragon. When they actually went to go force something, they were forcing for an objective. And if they won the fight, they were rewarded with objectives. And in fact, most of that last game was fought on Fnatic's side of the map because Royal are constantly trying to get turrets and inhibitors or barons and whatnot. Whereas Fnatic were setting up picks out of thin air, which we've sort of talked about being a strength for these guys because you can't expect it coming. They just suddenly show up out of a brush and you die. But even though the kill scores were so wildly different and in Fnatic's favor, every single time Royal was getting more dragons, more turrets, and more everything because they're fighting for a turret and actually capitalizing, whereas Fnatic gets a turret or gets a kill and then can only really disperse back to lanes.
Well, I'm super excited to see how SKT read this semi-final and go into this grand final. The next section that is coming along, as we do need to move the show along, is going to play into Doublelift's favor. Now it is time to see where the 4 of you guys stand when it comes to picking the winners here at the Season 3 World Championship. And as I've mentioned already, because Doublelift was the only one to choose Royal Club,
I'm a god.
He vaults into a tie with Monty at the top of the standings.
CLG at the top of the bracket.
I am a god.
CLG at the top of the bracket at World Finals.
Right. We're number 1.
Nobody
We're number 1.
Once again, Doublelift is playing for the late game. All right, guys, I can't believe I'm saying it, but the Season 3 World Final is less than 1 week away. Coming up next Friday, live from the Staples Center, China's Royal Club faces off against Korea's SK Telecom T1 for the title and the Season 3 Summoners Cup.
And the final series of the Season 3 World Championship starts Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific, 5 a.m. Saturday, Central European Time.
Well, that does it for us here at the Analyst Desk. Thanks, guys. We're going to send it back over to Shox on the main stage to